little more about what the heck's going on here. So in Git, the stuff you're working on, the changes you've made since you did anything with any Git commands, is stored in what's called your working directory. So when you're just making stuff, you haven't issued any commands to Git, that's where this stuff lives. Git doesn't know anything about that. When we type git add, it gets added to the index, sometimes referred to as the staging area, depending on which section of the Git documentation you're reading. And sometimes they call it the staging area in the messages on the command line when you type status and stuff. So what that is, what the index or the staging area is the stuff that will be committed if you were to type commit. And commit makes it a permanent part of your repository with something that actually points to that moment in time. So to get something to permanently be in your history, you have to both add it so that Git knows about it, and then commit it so that it's permanent and has a label, basically. You're just giving it a label. So we'll do it over and over, and we'll talk about what we're doing as we do it. So now we've just got a README, no big deal. I'm going to clear my terminal because there's an awful lot of crap there and it's distracting. So on a Mac, I'm going to do that with Command K. You can use Control L on Windows, Command K or Control L. You can also type clear. So I will be doing that frequently because otherwise it gets hard to tell what I'm actually working on. So let's do something a little more substantial. I'm going to type code space dot. Dot, again, being the current directory. That way I will open Visual Studio Code to the current directory and it'll kind of treat it like a project. So with any luck, you should see your README over here in the sidebar. Fat lot of good that does us. Let's make an HTML file. It's up this very top icon here. Also Shift-Command-E on a Mac. All right, let's create a new file. I'm going to hit this little tiny thing here. Pretty sure Command-N or Control-N will also do that. And I'm going to make index.html. And I'm going to spell index correctly when I do that. You may have noticed on the website there's a section called Tools that includes some extensions and settings for Visual Studio Code that I have. One of them is called HTML boilerplate. Since I have that installed, I'm just going to type HTML tab, and it's going to give me some HTML right off the bat. So if you don't have that installed, here's some motivation for you to do it. HTML tab. Anywhere in the document. Now, you don't need to do this, but I'm going to get rid of some of these conditional comments just because it's cluttering things up. So here I'm going to copy and paste this into Slack just in case you don't have it. Don't worry about it, it's in Slack. You can just copy and paste. And right off the bat, let's just give our thing a title. Look for title here. And in between the two tags, let's just type PeopleFactory. So let's dissect this HTML and look at its guts for just a moment. What do we call something like title or head or whatever? What are those things known as? So for each of those things, we have an opening and a closing tag, right? The whole thing altogether is called an element, an HTML element. And elements are generally marked by an opening and closing tag. Some things only have one tag, though, because they're empty. Like a break, yeah, BR. So title, that's not the case. So we have an opening tag, a closing tag. The whole darn thing is an element. This is a tag. This is a tag, a closing tag. And everything between the two make up its contents. Contents in this case is just text. But if we look at our head, the head element has a bunch of tags inside its contents. Oh. Elements, tags, contents. Some of these also have stuff that looks like this. What do we call those? Attributes. Gosh darn right. The attribute is name, and its value is description. Attributes belong in the opening tag. So vocab that we'll be throwing around nonstop. Good to know what the words mean. Let's put some stuff of our own in here. Let's just put an H1. So inside the body is where all the good stuff goes. Opening tag, closing tag, indicated by the slash. And inside we will put some text. A factory of people. And let's see what this looks like in our browser. I made, in the tools section, you'll see an extension called View in Browser that gives you a shortcut for this. If you don't have that out on your command line, at least on a Mac, you could say open index.html. I'm going to type in tab, and that will probably open it in your default browser. Otherwise, if you can open that directory and double-click the HTML file, that'll do it. If you can't find that directory, then inside VS Code, if you just right-click and say Reveal in Finder or Reveal in Explorer, that'll open it up in Explorer or Finder. Then you can double-click it, and it'll open in your browser. Command F1 or Control F1 is the default key binding for it.
Do you know why I can't save every time I try to save it in my VS Studio, it says permission denied?
There's an ownership issue with that folder, it sounds like, wherever you created it. We're going to look at that in a minute. Do you know how to resolve that if it isn't an issue? Okay. All right. So now let's start having fun with JavaScript. So we're going to open up for the first of many, many times the JavaScript developer tools that are built into Chrome. On a Mac, Shift-Command-J will do it. I'm sorry, not Shift-Command-J. I think Shift-Control-J is the Windows key. Option-Command-J will do it in Mac. Open up your developer tools to a tab called Console, where we can just start typing JavaScript. Is it Shift-Control-J on Windows? Okay. Did that work? F12? And then click Console. That'll take you to Elements. Yeah. F12 works. Maybe it's I. Maybe it's L. I don't know. No, it's a Option Command J on a Mac. Yeah. Let's see what you got. This. That's not Chrome. You need to open up Chrome.
It won't open on the HTML.
Okay. Okay.
Goes
Okay. Right click on it.
yeah.
Oh, say open with
Okay.
Chrome. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. Control Shift I on Windows. Control Shift I. It did work. Okay. Option Command J. So in here we can start typing JavaScript and see stuff happen. Let's type like the easiest thing in the world, console.log, and put a string in there. Double single quotes doesn't matter. I tend to default to single quotes in JavaScript, so let's just use single quotes. Try to be consistent. Try not to mix the two within the same file because your employer will be driven nuts by that. If your employer has a strong preference between single and double quotes, don't fight it. Just do whatever the house style is. House style in this boot camp is single quotes. So use single quotes. Hello, world. Why not? Yay. It prints hello world. It also says undefined because the return value of console log is undefined. No big deal. That's okay. But it's no fun if we don't get to mess with the contents of the page. So let's learn how to mess with the contents of the page. Hey, guess what? You can clear the console in here the same way you can your terminal. Command K on Mac, Control L on Windows. All right. So to mess with the contents of the page, we use something called the DOM, the Document Object Model. That is our API for messing with the contents of a page. And we get to it through the word document. Document dot, we can get to some methods as well as some properties with values. The one we want right now is called query selector. Query selector lets us pass it a string and let it identify portions of the page according to what we put in there. So let's just use the string h1. Hey, look at that. We get H1, a factory of people. If we hover over that with our mouse, oh, it highlights it up in the page. So we know it's actually a reference to that node in the DOM. Very nice, very nice. So this string H1, that's what's known as a selector, hence query selector. It's a CSS selector, really. So in style sheets, you use this syntax to identify the parts of a page that you want a rule to apply to. But these days in modern browsers, we can also use it to just grab stuff from the DOM to use in JavaScript. So let's see what we can do with one of those once we have one. Let's create a variable. And I'm going to say the word variable, and I'm going to use the word const. Trust me, I'm a professional. Const, let's just call it heading gets document.querySelector. Pass it the string h1. Oh crap, it says undefined. Why? Because any variable declaration returns undefined. Don't worry, our variable is fine. Let's type heading. It's there. Whew. So in the old days, we might use var to create a variable. In ES5 and earlier, ES6 gave us two new keywords, let and const. We'll talk about the differences once we get into functions and scope and stuff, which is not today. But for right now, just know var is terrible. Don't ever use var again. It's let or const. And The difference is not that consts are truly constants, but they're a little more constant than let. Basically, they can't be reassigned. I could not say heading equals something else, but I could still call methods on heading that transform it, and I could still mess with the properties of the heading, as we'll see. So as a general rule, use a const unless you know that you can't. And we'll see some instances when you can't. And when you can't, use let. So this is ES6 stuff, modern JavaScript. All right, so let's see what we can do with heading now that we have it. Notice it's telling us that it's an HTML heading element. All right, heading dot text content returns a factory of people. Very nice, as a string. So text content seems kind of obvious what that does. Notice no open close parens there. That's not a method. It's just a property of that object, just a value. Can we change it? Let's try. Heading.textContent equals quote PeopleFactory quote. Yeah, we can. Woo! We changed the page using the power of JavaScript. Magic, you're done. Bootcamp over, right? That's pretty exciting stuff. All right, let's put a little more on the page because right now this is really dang boring. So back here in our HTML, I'm going to create a new section of our document. And I'm going to use a tag called section. Opening tag. Closing tag. Let's put an empty line in there. And inside there, I'm going to put a totally meaningless element called a div. Making your pages div soup isn't great. People put them in there as a crutch to sort of use for style sheets and things to put a container. And we need one of those right now for the style sheet that I'm going to add way later. So let's just do it. Div. Meaningless semantically. And inside there, we're going to put a form because we want to do what he alluded to in his presentation. Put a text box on a page and make it do something with what we type in it. Predictably enough, form. And inside the form, we're going to put some stuff. Yes? As far as the way the browser treats it, there's no difference. It just has semantic meaning to us. So it's just a slightly more meaningful. It doesn't mean it literally doesn't mean anything as far as the browser is concerned. But div is meaningless, and we like our markup to have semantic meaning, so it tells us this is a section of the page. It's an HTML5 element. HTML5 added a bunch of these that aren't treated any different than divs by browsers, but they're nice, and they can be targeted directly with CSS. So like you don't have to put div class equals section. You can just put an element section, which is just, yeah.
So like another version of that would be like header and footer?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. New HTML5 elements. And I need to be reminded of your name, your things. Oh, yeah, Gabby, right. That's all right. We're forgiving people around here. All right. Let's put a little something in our form. Now, on the tools page, I also went on and on about something called emit, which makes it a little faster to type opening and closing tags for things. So I'm going to start using that out of laziness. If you're new to HTML, maybe you want to type them out for a bit, just for practice. But I'm going to hit just P, and then you may be able to hit just Tab, but autocomplete here is trying to suggest something else. So I have, and the instructions for this are also on the tools page, I've assigned a different keyboard shortcut, Control Space. So I type P and hit Control Space, and it builds out the opening and closing tag and puts my cursor right in the middle. So I can just start putting stuff in the paragraph. How nice. And inside there, I'm going to put two things, a label and an input. Label. On the next line, I'm going to put an input. Type equals text is just fine. Notice input does not have a closing tag because it is an empty element. And it has an attribute, type, set to text by default, which is fine. That'll be a text box. And I'm going to add another attribute called name so that I can refer to this input later. I'm going to give it a name of person name. I could have used the name, but that's a little confusing because it happens to be the name of the attribute too. Yes?
So for JavaScript, the convention here is single quotes, but for HTML?
For HTML, the convention is double quotes, correct. Yep. So now on this label, if I set the value of 4 to the same thing as that name, it'll know that it's specifically the label for that, which won't change the presentation, but it does change the behavior slightly. Sometimes if you click on a label, it'll focus the associated element. For screen readers, it makes it a lot easier for folks to figure out, if for people who can't see and use a screen reader to browse the web. Things like this help, so do it. It's the right thing to do. So in between the opening and closing label tags, as you might guess, we will actually label this field. We'll label it name. Now let's go ahead and refresh the page over in our browser. Yay! We have a label and a form field. Doesn't look like much, but it's got it where it counts. This is major progress. I feel like I should probably commit my work. Let's do it. Let's get in the habit, early and often. Back on my terminal. If I do a get status, I can see I have an untracked file, index.html. How do we let Git know about it? Git add, right? Right now, index.html is only in our working directory. We want Git to know about it. We want to move it to the index. So we use add. Git add index.html. Now if we run git status, we'll see changes to be committed. It knows about it. To take it from the index to the actual history, we need to commit. Git commit, and we type -m to log a message with that commit. And we'll say, create a page with a text box. So my commit messages will be written as imperative sentences, like commands, complete sentences without punctuation at the end. That way you can read it back as, this commit will create a page with a text box. So this is the style that GitHub itself uses as a standard. Google uses it, Facebook uses it, lots of companies use it. It's pretty good to just have a guideline like that so that your messages are consistent, so it's a little easier to browse your history and tell what's going on. So that's the one I will encourage. Having done that, okay, now it is in our history locally, but it is not yet on GitHub. It doesn't just sync automatically. We have to push it. So pushing it from our local box to a remote, we just type git push. Because last time we pushed, the first time that we pasted that in, we told it, always assume I mean origin, which is GitHub. Git push, and it's there. So if we look at our browser, visit our GitHub repository, we see 2 commits. Let's click that. We see add readme 33 minutes ago, and we see create a page with a text box a minute ago. Lovely.